All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Your Adrenal Fix Podcast, where we teach exhausted and burnt out adults the truth about their health so that they can get their health back quickly. And today I'm really joined with an expert in the field, and it's a real pleasure. I told him I'm like a kid in the candy store today. I'm here with Jin-Xiong She, who is a Ph.D., and he is the CEO and founder of Jinfiniti Precision Medicine. They are a longevity biomarker company that is aiming to maximize your health span by testing biomarkers and yielding precision nutraceuticals that really focus on NAD and senescence testing around the global market. So, Dr. Jin, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I met you earlier. Yeah, I probably don't remember, but you were at the A4M meeting, and I got my own NAD test result, which was very, very low. And it was a shocker, sort of smelling salt to see, because I'm helping other people with their health. But ultimately, I'm kind of curious. I always ask my guests a little bit about their background story. And I know you're in teaching and research, and you've been well known for your TEDdy study that basically screens hundreds of thousands of newborns for HLA, DRQ, DR, and DQ. I'm curious, tell me maybe a little bit of how that transitioned into longevity and NAD.
Sure. So I have been in academic research for almost 4 decades. And my research has been covering a wide range of topics, but most of my research focuses on childhood diabetes or type 1 diabetes. And we were trying to identify the genetic and the environmental factors that cause type 1 diabetes. And during my studies, I have developed expertise in biomarkers and also therapeutics. And that the knowledge and the experience we gained through all the years can be applied to any diseases or conditions or biomedical questions you want to answer. And now, about 5 years ago, I went to a meeting and met a functional medicine doctor in Florida. And we started talking about longevity and biomarker testing and why biomarker testing would be important to the whole field of functional medicine and longevity in particular. So I have an interest in longevity now because, I'm getting to an age where longevity becomes important, and I needed to do something for myself because I don't want to be one of the people who are going to be not mobile or not functional enough in their 50s and 60s or 70s. And if you look at the statistics, and most of the age-related diseases started occurring in the 50s and the 60s. And our lifespan is majorly reduced by the development of these chronic age-related diseases. So if we can come up with ways to prevent these conditions, we should be able to extend people's lifespan, or at least a health span, by a decade, 2 decades, and even 3 decades. So that's why my interest has very kind of suddenly and rapidly turned from a childhood disease to age-related problem. And I'm very happy that I made this switch because I think I'm able to help myself, help my family, my friends, and also help the whole community. And this is a very, very exciting time.
Sure. It's exciting to hear your background. Thank you for sharing. I would also add that when you isolate a really great predictor and assessment of the biological age and the chronological age via NAD, specifically intracellular NAD, then the type 1 diabetic children would stand to benefit with everything that you're going to be doing to support the environmental, and the boosting of intracellular NAD would still not only help with longevity and health span and aging well, but for sick people to heal quicker as well. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely. So we looked at a few dozens of different biomarkers 3-4 years ago to come up with a dozen, maybe at most 2 dozens of biomarkers that are most relevant to health, performance, and longevity. And what came up at the very top is actually NAD. And as you know, that makes sense because NAD is a coenzyme that's important for the function of over 400 other enzymes. Without NAD, all these enzymes wouldn't function at all. So if these processes don't function, then we don't have health. We even don't have life. So NAD is not only important for aging-related diseases, it's also important for pretty much all cellular functions and for health, and also important for almost all major diseases. And we have indeed found NAD deficiency in people with many different diseases.
Right. So we could say it's a very sensitive marker that will predict whether or not you're heading in a good trajectory or not, or maybe you're already in a challenge and you're not aware of it. And it's really good to be aware of what you have that you don't realize that you have, because it makes you take more accountability for your health because you could see it in black and white. So I guess the question is, now that you have the ability to measure the intracellular NAD, maybe tell our listeners why that was a problem in the past, or what the difference between circulating NAD and intracellular NAD is, and how you were able to come up with testing it.
Sure. So NAD, like many other molecules, are usually located inside the cells, but a fraction of them can be secreted or released from inside of the cells into the outside space. And then they got into the blood circulation. So that's why I call the NAD in the liquid part of the blood that we call plasma a circulating NAD, because the blood circulates all over the body and NAD also circulates all over the body. And that's going to be very important probably in the later part of our discussion, because circulating NAD has very different functions as opposed to intracellular NAD. Now, when most of the people talk about the functions of NAD, they are actually referring to NAD inside of the cells. Very few people, maybe no one except me, has been talking about circulating NAD or making a difference between circulating NAD and the intracellular NAD. And I can continue and to talk about them and how each of them function, or I'll wait for your question.
No, please continue. I think it's important. I'll just make a distinction for the listener that there's definitely a difference when you say NAD and how it's such an important factor for longevity and aging, and actually measuring the usable intracellular different function versus the circulating. And I would say that it is true with a lot of different nutrients and chemicals and compounds, that if it's intracellular or extracellular, because just because it's there doesn't mean it's inside metabolically, proteomically changing the cellular activity. So maybe with that, please continue in terms of distinguishing the two.
Sure. I will start by talking about the function of circulating NAD, because NAD IV infusion has been becoming very popular even in the general public, especially in the longevity and wellness community. Now, as you know, NAD IV has been very successfully used to treat various conditions, including neurological conditions, dementia, Parkinson's disease, even Alzheimer's disease. And it's also a very good treatment for addiction, including opioid addiction. And success is quite good. It has also been used to treat autism, and it has been used to treat Lyme's disease, all with very good successful stories. And although there are no clinical trials, double-blinded, the very vigorous research design, but the clinical evidence for the benefit from NAD IV, I think is undoubtful. However, a lot of people start using NAD IV as a treatment for longevity and for performances. And I'm very sorry to report that NAD IV is actually not really the best modality to increase intracellular NAD. And that has been surprising to many people. And I wouldn't say it really surprised me because of various reasons. And I can go into those reasons. But the bottom line is we now have quite extensive data to demonstrate that NAD IV does not increase intracellular NAD, at least in the vast majority of customers. And then, you beg the question, why you see the clinical evidence, but you don't see an increase in intracellular NAD? How do we reconcile these two observations? And I think we can explain the observations because NAD is actually a neurotransmitter. Very few people think about it, know about it, or talk about it. And they are receptors for NAD on neuronal cells and on immunological cells, immune cells. So that's why, and this is partly why NAD IV work quite well for treating the symptoms that I talked about, because they either serve as a neurotransmitter, it changes how the neuronal network is wired or activated. So I think that's so it's the circulating NAD or the NAD outside of the cells that serve as a ligand or neurotransmitter, and that really give the patients the benefit. For Lyme's disease, even COVID patients, okay, but not COVID patients or non-COVID patients are getting benefits from NAD IV. Again, that's probably through NAD as a ligand and changes the immune response. So NAD actually is a very potent anti-inflammatory compound. So you can explain why NAD doesn't get inside of the cells, boost your intracellular NAD, but still getting all the benefit. So I'm talking about that because I want physicians as well as customers, patients to understand that if you use the same a similar treatment or similar compound for the right indications, you're going to get great benefit. But if you use it for the wrong purpose, you're not going to get the benefit that you want. So it really depends on what's the purpose with the therapy. You should choose the right approach. And for performance, for longevity, you really have to boost your intracellular NAD, because NAD is important for energy production. I think we're probably going to talk about it and why it's important. And a lot of people complain that they get tired and they don't perform at their peak, and NAD is really at play, and that's primarily because of intracellular NAD. So you really want to bounce your intracellular NAD to the optimum level to regain the peak performance in your 20s, maybe 30s, right? So choosing the right approach for the right purposes is extremely important, and I have started to make people aware of this, and I think this is important, and we need to get the message across.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your information. So from what I take out of that, I was going to ask you, well, what accounts for the therapeutic benefits extracellularly? And it acts as a neurotransmitter, and there's a lot of therapeutic benefit for that. But then at the same time, understand that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, NAD in IVs didn't work for me because I expected it to help this or that, because it doesn't show clinically that it's going to boost the intracellular levels, which we'll get into in terms of not just performance enhancement and longevity and health span, but I'm sure a whole host of other major metabolic functions that will improve the extracellular effect even further as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And so with a lot of the when we can boost intracellular NAD, you are going to get a host of benefits, and then we can go through it, and one by one. You mentioned quite a few of these. It improves energy, it protects your DNA from being damaged by oxidative stress and other things, and it also helps people sleep, especially deep sleep, because NAD actually regulates the genes involved in controlling sleep. And we also have a lot of evidence that boosting NAD can improve insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, and that's primarily through, I believe, reduction of triglycerides. And it can also reduce some liver enzymes like ALT. So I think we're going to discover new functions, and we continue to discover new benefits, constantly. And this is such an important molecule that we can really develop a lot of treatment options for different patients, or just to improve people's overall health.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the statistics where over 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. And I really look at the way to explain that is they're just not respiring at the cellular level effectively to use oxygen and the food to produce ATP and water. And as a result, they are burning they're burning leaves and kindle, and they're not actually igniting the log, if you will. I'm curious just to know, before you were able to stabilize, because you were saying no one really tests intracellular NAD, was it not known that, or was just assumed up until that time that that IV NAD must boost intracellular, and then through actually isolating the intracellular NAD and then retrospectively seeing if they were doing IV shots that it didn't improve the level? How did you come to learn that, oh, actually it doesn't boost intracellular NAD?
Well, so, before we got involved, and people were not really making a difference, a distinction between intracellular NAD and circulating NAD, and because it's very, very hard to measure, especially circulating NAD, and the levels are very low, and the NAD in the plasma is very unstable, and you have a lot of enzymes that can degrade NAD, the NAD molecule, especially CD38. So if you are not careful, if you don't have the right sample processing strategy, you're not going to be able to measure circulating NAD. Okay, very few people, were able to measure circulating NAD, and so we kind of stumbled onto it, and I never questioned that NAD IV wouldn't be able to boost the intracellular NAD, and we learned it by data. I'm a data scientist. I have my own opinions, theories about a lot of things. But I'm at the end, what I believe is not what I used to think. I let the data to guide me and to make a decision for me. And I have done a lot of different things, but the one thing that I'm proud of myself is the ability to look at the data and look at data from a global view and from a very truthful view. And I don't want my opinion to bias the data. And I think, unfortunately, that's not always true, even among scientists. I mean, I'm a scientist. I'm afraid to say that. Either they don't understand the data fully, or they are kind of biased by their own opinions. Either one is good, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a pitfall that you really have to avoid. So I just look at the data, and the data that we have from clinical trials that we have done and from custom data all indicate that NAD IV does not boost intracellular NAD. There's no doubt about it. And it's black and white. It's even not questionable. There's no doubt that if you want to increase your intracellular NAD, you got to use a different approach, not through IV.
Right. Okay. So basically, it was very difficult to be able to stabilize whether it's circulating NAD or intracellular NAD. And when you stumbled upon the ability to isolate intracellular NAD, you also know from a scientific point of view, there's going to be circulating in the blood, and it's going to be inside the cell. And through research and through data and through inferences, we know without a shadow of a doubt that giving IVs with NAD doesn't impact the intracellular NAD that I'm able to test for. So I guess the two-question part is, how were you able to isolate it? And then number two, what actually boosts intracellular NAD?
Great question. So the measurement is very simple. And well, I should say very simple for intracellular NAD. A little more difficult for circulating NAD. And that's why we don't do a lot of circulating NAD tests, because it's more expensive and requires shipping in a container with a cold pack, and it becomes logistically more difficult. We can do it, and with intracellular NAD, we basically do a finger prick, and you get a drop of blood onto a blood card that's used for newborn screening, and we include a small bottle of buffer that we call the NAD fixing buffer. You dry the blood card, and you fix the NAD, and then drop it in a mail and ship it back to us. Usually within 5 days, you will get your NAD data back, and in your own account, in your own secured account. It's a very simple process. And the performance of the test is really great. The average variation between duplicates is 3.1%, and it's a great assay and very easy to do. So then on the second part, what are the best ways to boost intracellular NAD? And I'm sure there are going to be many different ways to do it. And so far, what I know, the best way to do it is through NAD precursors. And there are two major types of NAD precursors. One is called NR, nicotinamide riboside, and second one is called NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. Now, it takes two enzymes to make NAD from NR. So we call NR a two-step NAD precursor. It takes only one enzyme to make NAD from NMN. So we call it a one-step NAD precursor. So imagine that there has been a lot of debate, even wars between the NR camp and the NMN camp. And that's been going on for years, probably over a decade or so. Okay, I get asked which one works better. Well, the truth is both precursors actually work pretty well. And if you have to make a distinction, NMN is probably going to work for more people than NR. Why is that so? Because imagine that you have a deficiency in the enzyme that makes NR to NMN, then to NAD. Your NR is not going to work because you cannot make NMN from NR if you are deficient in the enzyme to make NMN from NR, right? And if that enzyme is deficient, your NMN will still work because you don't need to make NMN. You're already giving NMN to the customer or to the patient. So I think that the proportion of people who will benefit from NMN should be higher than the percentage of people who can benefit from NR. I don't know what's the proportion. Okay, that's the true answer because I have not done extensive study on NR, and we have done tests on with NMN on thousands and thousands of patients and customers. So we know that NMN is a very good precursor. And also, NMN alone may not be sufficient. And NMN alone may not work for many patients. It does work for many, and it does not work for fairly large proportion of people as well. So that's why you want to formulate supplements that have NMN and that have other ingredients that would help NMN to function. And also you want to have ingredients that will boost the overall cellular activity. And that we have actually formulating such a supplement that we call it Vitality Boost, and that can help over 95% of people to optimize their NAD. Remember, I call it optimize, not increase, okay? Because there is an optimum window of NAD level that are probably the best. And if you get too much NAD, that may not be good. Well, no, I don't know the absolute upper level of the optimum range. But like everything else, too much is not necessarily good. And this is going to be a debate that will continue on. I think we have a lot of data to have a reasonable guidance on where the optimum range should be. but that will get fine-tuned over time and with more data.
Yeah, no, that's a great rundown, Doctor. Thank you for sharing that. The way I look at it too is, while it's an amazing compound to be able to optimize NAD levels, it's also the perfect storm combination of environmental stressors and, like you said, maybe 2 steps removed genetic enzyme deficiencies or weaknesses that you can really not just expect the supplement to be a magic wand. You still have to address the things. I always like to use basic economics, demand and supply. So if you have weaknesses in the ability to supply it, and that could be dietary things, and it could be nutrients, and it can be enzymes and so forth, and you have an increased demand to use it up, and that could be DNA breakdown and a whole lot of transport enzymes or other, like just basically environmental stressors, then it's like filling up a cup that's got a hole in it. You're never really holding that juice, if you will. And I really like the idea where we do genomic testing to be able to determine what are the weaknesses in your demands, meaning what requires more NAD, sirtuin challenges. You mentioned CD38 and inflammatory things we could get into, but also DNA breakdown and challenges with X-rays and different types of increased demand for that lifestyle wise, and then being able to see potentially, well, you know what, you have that gene that doesn't convert the NR into NMN, and why would make no sense for you to take NR. You just be yelling at the deaf person louder, expecting them to hear you. So I think that that's the great thing about where we're headed, is even though it seems like the sky is falling to a certain extent with EMFs and pollutants and glyphosates and social media, and the stressors just are never ending. But then you have a brilliant fellow like yourself that's coming up with ways to support longevity by testing, and what you can track, you can manage, and when you can see it in plain white, black and white, you can improve it. So I appreciate that. So lots of other questions I guess we could talk about in terms of the salvage pathway and the de novo pathway. Did we kind of overlap what we talked about with just mentioning the things we did, or can we boost both pathways, and what are those, and kind of thing?
Yeah, we can. So I think that you can, for the lay audience, we don't really have to get into the salvage pathway or de novo pathway, kind of confuse people. And I would simply say that they are other types of NAD precursors. I think you told me you are a practical guy, and I'm a practical guy. I want to give
right, like building blocks kind of thing. You're talking about building blocks, or
yeah, the building blocks. So you have the basic building blocks for NAD are nicotinamide and nicotinic acid, and some people call the two together as niacin, but most people use niacin as nicotinic acid. Okay, even experts sometimes get this just confused or don't pay attention to it. So I that's why I avoid to use niacin. If I use niacin, I would only use it as nicotinic acid. Okay, so in the NAD molecule is basically the basic element is nicotinamide, and then you have ribose, and you have nucleotides. Okay, and we have a lot of ribose in our body, and we also have a lot of nicotinamide, but we don't have enough to make enough NAD. So many people have thought that, well, we can take nicotinamide or nicotinic acid and to boost NAD level. And actually, a number of people can get very high levels of NAD, but the problem is only a very small proportion of the people can get their NAD higher using the very basic elements. they don't work as efficiently as NMN, for example. But it can work for some people. So, and also in addition, both nicotinic acid and nicotinamide have a lot of other health benefits as well. What's really important is to find out whether the strategies that one chose or chooses is actually working for them. And we'll come back to the testing. Without the testing, you don't know whether it's working for you or not. What's the right type of supplement, or what brand of supplement, and more importantly, how much you should take. For you, because we are all built differently. You talk about the genomics, our genes, our DNA are all different. And depending on what genes we have and what environmental exposures we have, and what dietary, exercise, and all these environmental factors, and plus our genes, that determine how we respond to everything, including how we optimize our NAD. At the end of the day, if you cannot test, you don't know what is working or not. And with some individuals, it's super easy to get their NAD very, very high, and even too high. With other people, it's much more difficult. And so that's why we developed the test to help people identify what works for them, how much they need, whether they're taking too much or they're not taking enough. So we get their NAD optimized. Not just NAD, we do a lot of other tests, but we're talking about NAD now. We get NAD optimized, and you can stay there and have a great time.
No, it's a really great answer, because everyone is different. Everyone has different stressors. No two snowflakes are the same, right? I mean, whether it's genetics and or environment, there's no replica of the same factors that will support NAD optimization. And so a couple questions I wanted to get into were the relationship between NAD and biological and chronological age, especially because I know you don't just test NAD intracellular, you test DNA methylation and you test senescent cells. So I guess it's a good transition into what is the relationship between NAD and aging, aside from what we've talked about already. If you don't have it there, you're going to age potentially quicker. But how are we using DNA methylation and senescent cells as a proxy? And a faux pas that I made because I didn't plug my computer in before we started. So I'm going to get my computer. I'm going to have to edit this out, but I'm going to be getting my plug. So I apologize.
Okay. No problem.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll make sure we edit that out. So you can start with that, with however you want to start. Yeah.
All right. So what was the last question? Maybe
so we wanted to know the relationship between biological age and chronological age, where NAD fits in, and also DNA methylation, senescent cells, what you do, sort of, what's the sort of interrelationship?
Sure. So, the chronological age is simple. It's, your birthday, present day minus your birthday, right? But the chronological age may or may not really reflect how you are doing and what's your biological age. You can estimate your biological age by many different ways. one of the most popular way of measuring biological age is to use DNA methylation. And the test is available from many different companies, and this test can provide a good estimate on what's one's biological age. And we also provide a biological age test from our company. But I think it's a good information to have, and it can be used to assess what some longevity therapies are actually providing benefits. I think it is useful information. How well it can do, I'm not so sure, and I don't know whether NAD can actually influence the methylation age. I don't have the data yet, and it's a question that we would like to answer. But there are suggestions that NAD can actually extend your telomere length, and telomeres are the end of the chromosomes, and they got shortened over time, and you can use telomeres to measure biological age as well. And there are some evidence that NAD can keep the telomere longer and for a longer period of time. So these are still open questions that we need to study, and when I say we, the scientific community. But what we do know is the following. So we know NAD is a very good anti-inflammatory compound. We discussed that a little bit. Chronic inflammation is one of the underlying causes of all chronic diseases. And so keeping inflammation under control does a lot of good for one's health. There's no doubt about it. So we know NAD provides a lot of benefit on that. We also know that NAD can help reduce oxidative stress. And oxidative stress are basically free radicals that our cells produce as a byproduct as we create energy, create ATP molecules. And that's just part of what our cells do. But depending on the cellular conditions, some people produce more free radicals or waste, others produce less. Unfortunately, Americans are particularly high in oxidative stress. If you look at the Caucasians in America versus Caucasians in Europe, European white and American white, and American whites have much higher oxidative stress than European whites. I mean, genetically, they should be comparable. It's the lifestyle that you mentioned. So, and if you look at the African Americans, and the level of oxidative stress is even higher. If you compare Asians, like Chinese, I'm Chinese, and Chinese from America have much higher oxidative stress than Chinese in China. So something that we do here, probably the food, and are particularly bad to create free radicals, and that's really very important sub-health issues or risk factors for diseases that we as medical professionals don't talk about, or at least don't talk about enough. And this is something that I'm very interested in, again, to get the ideas and to attract people's attention. You got to pay attention to these free radicals, to the oxidative stress, and because really bad for our health, and it damages our DNA, damages our proteins, and it creates all kinds of problems. Some people even go as far as saying that, oxidative stress or mitochondrial dysfunction are the underlying causes of everything. And I think that there are some, good reasoning behind that argument, and it is something that we need to pay much more attention. And the third benefit that NAD can have is to reduce cellular senescence. Cellular senescence is becoming very popular, not only in the longevity community, but now it's starting to gain popularity in the mainstream or larger medical community, because it's involved in so many different diseases. And we actually have shown that senescence actually determines how cervical cancer patients respond to chemotherapy. And the survival time is largely dependent on the cellular senescence level. And then that's just one example. So these are the three biggest risk factors for health or for disease: chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, cellular senescence. These are three biggest, and we got to take care of these three. And all three are related to NAD level. And finally, I want to emphasize, and we have data for it, is your NAD level actually influence, or I even go as far as to say, determines how you respond to other therapies, including anti-inflammatory, anti-senescence, and antioxidative treatment. If your NAD level is not high or optimized, your response to this treatment is much less than otherwise. So that's why I'm saying to a lot of people, I mean, if your listeners don't remember anything, just remember the next sentence. NAD optimization is the first and the necessary step towards health and longevity. This is the first thing that you really want to stress, because it influences so many different things. And fortunately, we know how to do it now. It's something that we really can do, and we just need to make people aware of it and start taking action. I'm trying to convince people one by one. I spend a lot of my time to talk to my customers and try to help them to figure out how to get NAD optimized, and so they can get the full benefit of everything else that they try to do to stay healthy and to stay out of diseases.
Yeah, no, that's great summary. Just if for nothing else, continue to optimize your NAD levels through proper lifestyle and nutrition. And I guess what's really amazing with what you're alluding to is now that we have the ability to benchmark and quantify what our actual levels are, and we could manage it, we can also, I guess, create protocols before we do certain things like chemotherapy, radiation, and so forth, so that you have better outcomes, knowing going into it that you're already constitutionally strong to be able to have a more favorable outcome. The other thing I'll say too, because I really do want to introduce you to, we were talking earlier, Bob Miller, and helping you maybe do some research studies with the people that have very low NAD levels, and no matter what you do, they don't go up, and then being able to see what are these genomic things. But one of the things he mentioned to me, which I think resonates with what you were saying with the American male versus the European or the Asian male, is that genetics aren't different per se, very, very small percentage, but environmentally it is. And I think he kind of gave us not the doomsday, but the real, like, we'll look back at some point in time in our environment and say, what were we thinking? And this is a direct quote in terms of glyphosates and polyesters and aluminum, and just the list goes on and on and on and on in terms of what we're doing to our biochemistry that's depleting our inborn chemistry that ultimately expresses as aging and sickness. And hence that's why we see so many people falling apart with different exposures to different pathogens and different life stressors. And one thing that I remember you telling me, which I think it's important to talk about when we were at the A4M meeting, was that a lot of people will probably not want to hear this. And you did mention the I guess the fight between the Hatfields and the McCoys, or the NM camp and the NMR camp. But the reality is that maybe you can comment on how the quality of the nutrient, all things being equal, and how much you actually need, because a lot of people are hopefully trying to get them up, not knowing that the measly amount or the unstandardized source that they're getting it from is not going to move the needle. So maybe shed light on that from your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you bring up an extremely important question, and we actually have some answers. So if you look at most supplement companies, including some of the very big ones and best known, they don't recommend enough. Okay. So based on our extensive data, I recommend 1,000 milligram of NMN or NR to start with. And that's a good starting point. Some people are going to need less, other people are going to need more. But you don't want to start from too low or too high. And the middle point is 1,000 milligram daily. You can do it. I do it twice a day, because I like to boost my energy a little more often. So if you want to do it once a day, that's fine, but I recommend it twice a day. So what's really interesting is there seems to be a threshold that you have to pass to get your NAD up. If you don't pass that threshold, you are going to get no benefit or very little benefit. Unfortunately, a huge proportion of the people who have been taking the product for sometimes years, they get very little or no boost of NAD because the amount of NAD have been taken is below their threshold. And this threshold is not the same for everyone. Okay, it's variable, and that's why we have to test. So, and once you pass the threshold that you need, the level actually jumps pretty quickly. And if you're below that threshold, you get very little boost. If you go above this threshold, boom, it goes up. So there's no magic solution, unfortunately. You just have to start with the right dosage, the right product, and then get it tested very quickly, and to find out where you are, so you can decide on whether you want to increase or decrease the dosage, whether you want to switch different brands or different types of supplement or different types of treatment to get your level to where you want. And that's basically what you needed to do. So I have one customer, I'm not going to say his name, obviously. He started from 100 milligram a day. He did so many tests with me. As I said, why you're spending all this money? I mean, he went up from 100 milligram, and then he increased by 100 milligram every time, and then he does the test. And I said, you really need to push it up. He had to go up to 1,500 milligram a day, and he got his level to over 90 micromole. And then I told him to reduce a little bit. Now he's around the 70. We just finished his test yesterday. He's at 72 now, perfect spot. So, I think if he listened to me, he would have it optimized with 2 tests, and within 4 to 8 weeks. Another misconception is people think that it takes a long time to get NAD up. No, it's not true. You only need 2 to 4 weeks. In many people, only after a few days, your NAD level is already high. So most people will reach a very high level after 2 weeks. By 4 weeks, almost everyone reaches the peak. So that's why I recommend retesting between 2 and 4 weeks. If you don't have your level up by 2 weeks, forget about it. The strategy is not working for you.
The analogy I like, and you said it earlier, we're simple guys. We don't want to go into the weeds per se. We just want to know what we need to do to boost the levels. And the analogy I would use is, I don't get that I haven't paid now they're being paid for, but student loans is a bad example. But I don't get why I'm not making a dent in my student loans, because you're only making interest payments. That's why. And until you actually cut into the deficit, and that's that progressive overload. I'm trained in exercise physiology, and if you do exercises that don't stimulate any type of response, it's a no response. If you do a little bit more than what you need, it's going to be a progressive overload. If you do a lot more than what you need, that difference is going to be pain. And I think you want to just not so much pain with NAD, but you want to do a little bit more than what you need. And then that's also pointing to the idea of why American men would have lower levels or more oxidative stress, and addressing your lifestyle factors and knowing what exposures and what chemicals and what stressors, and especially we didn't get into, we'll do it for part 2, we'll leave a little cliffhanger, is in terms of one of the major ways that NAD gets depleted is through our nutrient sensing pathways. And I think the world is catching up on the obesity rates to Americans if you look at all the different countries now. So I don't know if we share the prize in that anymore, but maybe we can use that as a segue for our next time that we talk, if you're willing to do, in terms of, well, what's time restricted eating, what's the relationship to autophagy and to eating lots of protein and mTOR, what does that have to do with anything, and what does sirtuins have to do with this, so that we can maybe go a little bit deeper for our other people. But the bottom line is, get tested and know what your levels are, so that you can determine and then embark on a prerequisite and building blocks and lifestyle recommendations to boost it, and then get your levels up. And what I really like about your company is that you have on your website, and we'll give links to the podcast when we publish this, is you have if we don't boost your levels, we will work hand in hand with you to be able to troubleshoot why. So what I do is I always ask a question to my guests before we leave, is I say, hey, knowing what you know now, and you're a smart guy, and I'm sure you've always been a smart guy, but you may have not had all this information when you were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, what would you have told the younger version of yourself that would have helped you or accelerated your health or just your longevity at an earlier age, if you would have known what you know now? What would you have told yourself back then?
Well, very, very good point. So, one surprise to me was we saw a very sharp and deep decline of NAD in many people in their late 20s. That was totally shocked. So the point is, you want to start managing your health as early as possible. You know, the people in their 20s and 30s, I used to be there, and they think they are inconvincible. No, that's not totally true. And if you keep yourself up and keep yourself healthy, you're going to stay healthy and for a long time. But if you don't pay attention to your health in your younger ages, you are going to pay your dues when you reach the older age. And it's never too early to start paying attention to your health.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because you're seeing, I think for the first time in decades, the lifespan or the age range is life expectancy is going down, I believe. And also too, type 2 diabetes is no longer called adult onset diabetes. And you're seeing so much more metabolic chaos, if you will, with these kids nowadays, and sleeping with their phone underneath their pillow, and Wi-Fi and Amazon Prime, and the refrigerator opened at 2 a.m. in the morning, and all of these different things that really pull on the purse strings of their longevity and really deplete their NAD. It'd be interesting to be able to do a test of 20-year-olds NAD in the 1900s, 20-year-olds in the 1920s, and then see the NAD levels maybe incline and then decline. I don't think we'll be able to do that. But listen, I appreciate your time. If you have any other questions or points you want to bring in now, otherwise I would love to be able to maybe schedule a part 2. And then I'm really, really excited to start getting my own NAD levels, because I want to have integrity with what I do, because mine were super low, and I'm waiting for my next pure product to come in to be able to boost them, and to be able to offer testing to people, not just the intracellular NAD, but also looking at some of these other signs of aging and inflammatory weaknesses that need to be addressed. And I'm just really grateful for smart guys like you that offer amazing products and services and information to people that are searching for it. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you very much. It has been my pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. And your product will arrive next Monday, and I look forward to getting your NAD optimized. I think you are going to feel amazing once you get it optimized.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll talk to you on our next show.
Great, thanks.